Hi everyone, this is Ms. Tom with Absolute Value Equations and Inequalities. Alright everybody, so let's talk about the first situation. So the first situation is talking about Henry and his home. It says that his home is at the point 0, so here, that's where Henry's home is. And then it also talks about how he's 7 miles away from home, meaning he's here, 7 miles away from home. However, is that the only distance that is 7 away? No, actually, there's another distance that's 7 away. There's also -7. This is also 7 distance away from 0. So what is that called? If you remember, it's called the absolute value of something is 7, where the absolute value of 7 could have two answers. It could either equal -7 or +7. There are two answers for x to be, and I really want you guys to remember that there's two answers that x could be, because when we look at this situation, what are the possible values of x? X is the absolute value of it is equal to 5, and what are some possible values of it? If it's the absolute value of something is 5, then that means we could say that x could either equal 5 or it equals -5. There's two possible answers, one that's positive and one that's negative. Now, keeping that in mind, one that's positive, one that's negative, what if you have a more complicated situation? What if you have this? Well, we're going to use the same idea where we say there's going to be a positive answer and there's going to be a negative answer. And what I mean by negative answer is I mean that 5 is going to be negative. Keep that in mind right there. So now let's go ahead and solve for x. So I'm going to go ahead and do the right side or the left side right here real quickly. All right. Okay. I'm going to circle that 0 pair out. We end up getting 2x is equal to, I don't know why I wrote equal, greater than, there we go, equal to 2. We're going to divide by the 2, and we get x is equal to 1. Now, is that only one solution? No, actually. In this case, there are multiple solutions. So we're going to need to subtract 3 to both sides. This ends up being a 0 pair. We end up getting 2x is equal to -8. Then we're going to go ahead and divide by 2, and we get x is equal to -4. So in this case, as you guys can see, absolute value has two potential solutions. It has 1 here or -4 here. Those are the potential solutions for this scenario. Now, looking at this one, again, we have another absolute value problem. I'm going to pause the video just so that you guys can try it on your own, and then I'll show you the solutions. The main ones that I really want to talk about in this video are the inequalities. So go ahead and do this one. Alright, how do we do on them? Well, we should have gotten x is equal to 7 in one case. So that's going to be this one right here. And then we also had -3 2/3, which is about -3.66. Is going to be kind of about here. So there's two answers for x, one of them being 7 and one of them being -3 2/3. So that one was pretty simple, but now we're going to go on to inequalities. Now, inequalities are very, very special because when you're dividing by a negative, you need to make sure you flip the sign. What I mean by that is this. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to say 5 is greater than 2, right? But the moment that we have negatives, or we divide by a negative or multiply by a negative, like this, is this true? No, it's no longer true. We have to switch the sign. So when we have the negatives, we need to make sure we switch the sign. So let's go ahead and talk about this first one. So we've got x minus 2 is less than 3. That's the positive one. And then we also got the negative one. X minus 2 and the -3. But what's important is that we change the sign so it looks like that. So this one, it needed to switch. So anytime you guys see that we have to have a negative, you need to make sure you switch that sign. So then we're going to go ahead and solve for x. Going to add by 2 to both sides here. This one is not as challenging. The main thing about it is that you need to just make sure you switch the sign there. So we've got x is less than 5. Then over here, we're going to go ahead and add 2. And then we're going to notice this is a 0 pair. We've got x is greater than -1. So what does that look like? Now keep in mind x is less than 5. We're going to circle that. We're not going to fill it in because it's less than 5. So it's going to be about in this direction. Then when we see x is greater than -1, greater than -1 is here, circling that, and we're going to be moving that into this direction. And so what do we shade in? Everything here, everything here. So those are considered solutions for x. All right, let's keep going. How did we do on that one? Did you guys do okay? Hopefully yes. Okay, once again, we've got another situation. Keep in mind, we've got to have 2 answers for this because we see those absolute values. One of them being positive, one of them being negative. And remember what we talked about? We talked about how if it was negative, we have a negative in the absolute value. We need to make sure that the sign gets switched. So we've got x plus 2 is greater than 1. That's the positive answer. Then we've got x plus 2 is less than 1. Keep in mind, what did we do? We did the switch of the inequality, and we did that switch because the inequality changed directions when you divided by a negative. So we're going to go ahead and draw our line here. Subtract by 2 to both sides. We do to one, we do the other. Then this is going to go, bye. We end up with x is greater than -1. This is one answer. And then we've also got this one where we subtract by 2. And let's see this one. This one's going to be 0. X is less than -1. All right. And so what do we get for our situation here? So it says x is greater than -1, which is here. I'm going to circle that. Greater than -1, greater than, oh, I circled 1. Meant to circle -1 here. X is greater than -1, but it's also less than -1. So that just means that it could be anything as long as it's not equal to -1, we're okay. So this is how you do the inequality graph. All right, we're going to do one more here, and then we're going to be finished with the lesson. Great job so far. So right now we've got the 2 times the x minus 1. It's going to be greater than or equal to 0. There's the positive answer, and then we also need to make sure we have the negative answer, which I know sounds kind of strange because it's -0, but you'll see what happens. So we end up going like this. Get 2x minus 2 is greater than or equal to 0. Going to go ahead and add 2 to both sides. We end up with 2x is greater than or equal to 2. And then we go ahead and divide by 2. So we get x is greater than or equal to 1. Now we look at these cases over here. Got 2x minus 2 is less than or equal to 0. Continuing on. All right. We end up with 2x is less than or equal to 2. Dividing by that 2, and we get x is less than or equal to 1. So in this case, it's kind of interesting because it's similar to the last one, we've got 1 here, but it's actually filled in because it's equal to 1. X could be greater than it. It could also be less than it. And that's what we have as our graphing for solutions for inequalities. Now in this lesson, I have the homework is a little bit easier. Make sure to come to office hours if you need help. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.